another man's dove, and one man's push is another man's shove. One man's rock is another man's sand, one man's fist is another man's hand. One man's tool is another man's toy, one man's grief is another man's joy. One man's squawk is another man's sing, one man's crutch is another man's wing. One man's pride is another man's humble, one man's step is another man's stumble. One man's pleasure is another man's pain, one man's loss is another man's gain. One man's can, another man's grail, one man's anchor, another man's sail. One man's ride is another man's wrong, one man's fish is another man's cuisson. Every father's daughter, every mother's son, the only thing the same is that it ain't for anyone. One man's deuce is another man's ace, and one man's back is another man's face. One man's reason is another man's rhyme, one man's dollar is another man's dime. One man's tree is another man's post, and one man's angel is another man's ghost. One man's rain is another man's drought, one man's hope is another man's doubt. One man's false is another man's fair, one man's tooth is another man's hair. One man's funny is another man's crude, one man's feast is another man's food. One man's dread, another man's dream, one man's sigh, another man's scream. One man's water is another man's wine, one man's daughter make another man cry. Every father's daughter, every mother's son, the only thing the same is that it ain't for anyone. One man's famine is another man's feast, and one man's pet is another man's beast. One man's bat is another man's ball, one man's art is another man's scroll. One man's friend is another man's foe, one man's Joseph is another man's Joe. One man's tack is another man's nail, one man's freedom is another man's jail. One man's road is another man's rut, and one man's if is another man's butt. One man's treasure is another man's trash, and one man's landing is another man's crash. One man's word, another man's lie, one man's dirt, another man's sky. One man's skin is another man's color, and one man's killer is another man's brother. Every father's daughter, every mother's son, the only thing the same is that it ain't for anyone. And William said it best, he said it a long time ago. Unless you have made no mistakes in your life, be careful of stone